Hi guys, welcome to today's Instagram Live. We are talking to Scott Gooding, who's just about to come online, and I am going to join him in on the call. And today he is here to talk about sustainable diet, nutrition, and you can ask him all of your questions too. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Ash, and I am one of the members at Pep Creative, and we manage the IQS social media channels. So I'm just going to try and get him in. He is in now. So let me just join him in.
Yeah, I guess my sort of segue into this industry came via adversity. So as I said, I studied exercise science. You know, I went to uni, did that when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and then never really sort of took it up as a vocation or a career until I injured my back and I couldn't physically do what I was doing prior to that. So I went and saw a careers counselor. She said, oh, look, you've got this exercise science background, you're passionate about training, you're passionate about exercise, why don't you become a PT? Which was kind of daunting at that point in my life. Like the thought of standing up in front of people and telling them what to do was so removed from what I'd done in the past. Like I'm inherently quite introvert, so the thought of standing up in front of people was terrifying. Anyway, cut a long story short, I became a PT, and fast forward a few years, I go on a TV cooking show that really propels my interest and love of cooking.
You want to know what that cooking show was?
It was MKR, but it was a long time ago. It was when it was in black and white. It was quite some years ago.
You make out like it was no big deal, but that's awesome.
Yeah, look, I'm particularly grateful for that experience. It was stressful. It was hard. I'm not going to lie. But it gave me, see, there's a couple of things running parallel that got me to have the message, the type of message that I have today, but also the fire in my belly. So I injured my back, as I just explained, and I had that condition that was very limiting for me. Like I had a lot of pain, a lot of inflammation, a lot of restriction. So obviously that affected my mood, affected my identity. Yeah. And what helped me elevate out of that position was really looking at my diet. Mm-hmm. So up until that point, I didn't have a terrible diet, but now I can look back and go, okay, well, there were some potholes there. I probably drank too often, or there was some food groups that weren't that sort of pernicious to health chronically, and so I just tidied it up. But that 7 years I tried to fix myself in a very mechanical way. I guess from my experience as an exercise physiologist, I could see on the scans that there was a mechanical injury, right? So there's a disruption to the discs. So in my logic dictated that it had to be a mechanical solution, i.e. massage, acupuncture, all that sort of typical stuff. I didn't have much success, if any, in the 7 years of pursuing it. And I was relentless. I didn't, if one person didn't fix me, I'd go and find another person. It was just this, I was just chasing my tail for about 7 years. Anyway, I started to read around food and nutrition and how that could be pro-inflammatory, but it could also be anti-inflammatory. And so systematically, I started to remove foods that were pro-inflammatory and embrace and pepper my plate with foods that were anti-inflammatory. And the effect of that was actually pretty monumental. It wasn't overnight, but it was over weeks and certainly months that I started to get more mobility. I started to be in pain less often. The intensity of pain started to diminish. And so it allowed me, Scott, to come back into my own life and regain a little bit of happiness, because I wasn't present for 7 years. I don't want to swear on your channel, but I was a grumpy for most of that 7 years. You know, I wasn't a pleasant person to be around because I was constantly navigating chronic pain.
Yeah, and with that is that you are going from doctor to doctor, and if they're not giving you any information and you're not the specialist in that mechanical sense, you kind of end up having to find your own way through it, right? So I guess it was like the whole 7 years of discovery got to the point where you realize that there are so many other methods that you could try, but I don't think there's that much education around it, or there wouldn't have been then.
Yeah, you're beholden to the system almost. You know,
Exactly.
I'd never had a back injury, or any injury of significance. You know, I was 29, and so literally one day it happened, and I was like, you know, it happened on the Friday. By the Monday, I thought, you know, I'll be back to my usual routine. The Monday came and went. I was like, I think I need to go and see someone. So I literally, this is sort of would have been pre-internet, but pre sort of ease of information, I guess. So I just literally got the white pages, found a local chiropractor, and I saw her for like 6 weeks, every day
Yeah.
for 6 weeks. And then in the 6th week, I said, oh, when do you think I'll be able to run again? She said, oh, you'll never be able to run again, which was like a sledgehammer. So I went, right, okay, well, I'll never see you again. And so
Yeah.
I stayed with a specialist or a modality if that person was able to give me some light at the end of the tunnel. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
you will get better. Yes, your pain will recede. And if they didn't, I'd move on, and that was the last time I'd ever see them, because I wanted my old life back.
Yeah.
I was this fit guy. I wasn't healthy because I was driving my body into the ground by overtraining,
Mm-hmm.
but I was fit and I wanted that again. So all this is running parallel to being a PT and asking people to do a squat and do a push-up, and if I was cruel enough, ask them to do a burpee. All stuff that I actually couldn't do myself without consequence of being in pain and discomfort. So, you know, I felt kind of fraudulent for a lot of years, until that time that I started to sort of knuckle down and look at my nutrition.
Yeah.
And as I said, sort of crowding out the pro-inflammatory foods, and it was epic. You know, the transformation within about 12 months. And look, this is me. This is a case study. It's only me. There's N equals 1. It wasn't a clinical controlled trial. But the way I see it is, if I was eating foods that drove an immune response and drove inflammation, my body's constantly putting out spot fires, right? It's not having the bandwidth to address my injury. Our body's MO is to heal and repair and to move us forward. So if it's constantly putting out little fires, it's not dealing with the injury that I have in my back. So once I gave it that bandwidth, it attended to what it needed to attend to, and I saw improvement.
That's amazing. So that kind of brings me to my next point. So for people who are tuning in now, they don't know who I am. I'm Ash Templar, and I work at Pep Creative, and we manage the I Quit Sugar social channels, which gets to the point that you have been working with Sarah Wilson from I Quit Sugar for quite some time. You featured in some of her ebooks. So it would be good to kind of even hear about what your experience has been with I Quit Sugar from its infancy, and then we can kind of go into like sustainable eating and then anti.
Yeah, so I guess I've known Sarah for a number of years. In the infancy, to use your word, I was part of the expert panel,
Yeah.
in inverted commas. So my role was to answer any questions on, I forget now, but it probably was nutrition or exercise, maybe exercise.
Yeah.
But her books sort of coincided with the release of my first books, which were the Clean Living series. So it was all around that sort of 2012, 2013. And I think whether, I wasn't talking about I quit sugar necessarily, or I didn't put that label on it. Sarah owned that. I was talking about eating, predominantly natural and unprocessed foods.
Yeah.
But we're all talking about the same thing, really. Whether I'm coming at it from that perspective, crowding out the processed and unrefined, it has the same result as if you're quitting sugar, because sugar is, it's the same end product. So whether, we were talking about paleo, or I was talking about paleo, Sarah's talking about sugar, like we're all of the same ilk, we're all of the same family. So we were kind of very supportive of each other. And, unlike me, Sarah's had immense success with all her books and the coverage that she's had, and good on her. Like, she's a huge, there's a couple of players in Australia that have really impact on a big scale, and Sarah's definitely one of them.
Yeah.
She should, I'm sure she recognizes that, but if she doesn't, I tip my hat to her.
Yeah, and it's good because I think you guys align on a lot of your values too. So I think it's good to kind of get you on here to talk all about how you feel about food. So I'm going to start with some questions that have come in from the community. I think some might have come from your community as well, but I'll start off by talking about sustainably. So what would you say are the key ways to achieve this, and how do you think you can do it?
Yeah, it's not easy. Like anything that we're talking about today, there's no like definitive guide to it. It's a lot of it's highly subjective. So we're going to be talking about sustainability. We're going to be talking about the ethics of eating meat versus vegan. Like, it's highly personal. It's highly individualized. But some of the places you can start when you're thinking about sustainability is, I guess, there's a piece on education.
Yeah.
So what muddles the water are biased propaganda, shall I say, documentaries. And so there's been a number in the vegan camp that portray a pretty disgusting perspective on industrialized farming. Now, I think it's abhorrent, but it doesn't reflect the whole picture or both sides of animal farming. There are ways that there's animal husbandry, it promotes ecological health, environmental health, and the product benefits human health. So there needs to be more of a balance in the media, I think. But some of the places that you can start are asking your fishmonger and your butcher where certain cuts of meat have come from, where they're sourcing. Like, understand the provenance of your food is first and foremost. So rather than just purchasing unconsciously, be it in Coles, IGA, Woolworths, wherever you peruse and get your shopping, start to think, okay, well, where could steak have come from? And does that, can I go on their website? Can I do a bit of due diligence on that farm or that farmer or that region? Does that modality, does their methodology of farming or food produce align with my values? That's kind of binary. You go, well, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. And if it's a no, you go, okay, well, I'm gonna choose another brand or another range that does align with my. So what I meant by there's no hard and fast rules with this, it's true, because it's local specific. So the questions that I might ask at my butcher might be different to yours, Ash, and accessibility of sustainable food might be different from where you live to where I live. But I think that needs to be the first port of call, that we need to start asking about where our food has come from and understanding the provenance of food. Because there is, I know we're going to get to this, and it's a hotly contested debate, this vegan versus
Mm.
meat, and it's not. I don't think it should ever be meat versus non-meat. That's not. It's not nonsensical, but there's rights and wrongs in both fields, right? The discussion should be the provenance of that food, whether it's a chickpea or whether it's a cow. It's it's the ethics of how these foods are grown. It's not meat versus non-meat. It's the ethics. It's the provenance. It's the sovereignty. It's tracing our food back to its source. Has it used chemicals? Is there pesticides? Are there chemical interventions into how that food has grown? Does that impact the local ecology, the waterways, the animals? Like, are we choosing veganism, but yet we're subscribing to vast swathes of land being dedicated to monocropping? In which case, can you absolve yourself from the death of sentient animals? Probably not. It's a very complex, detailed discussion, and probably one that we probably won't narrow down today with it.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head where you say it's like everything's different because everybody's values are different. So then it's kind of realized in that sense because it depends where you live and what your values are to where you kind of land with that. So if we were to talk about what would be on a day of a plate for you, what would you eat in a day?
Yeah, good question. First of all, where do I start? I start with a coffee.
Yeah.
And it's a bloody strong coffee. It's enough to send me to the stratosphere. So I have that with some MCT and some butter, otherwise known as a bulletproof coffee, and that will kind of get me moving. That will get me firing on all cylinders, and the next time I eat will largely depend on whether I've trained. So if I haven't trained, I'll probably push through till early lunch, and that can look anywhere from, a salad. I always try and frame my plate with prioritizing protein, whatever source that is. So whether that's animal source or plant source, centralize your plate based on protein, and then an abundance of above ground veggies and mixed salad and all that stuff. And then obviously some healthy fats in there. But that's kind of, I guess, the foundation or the template but it's not that I overthink it. It becomes innate at some point. You prioritize, what's my lunch going to look like? What's my dinner going to look like? You go, okay, is it going to be chicken? Is it going to be beef? Is it going to be fish? Is it going to be whatever? So lunch can be, a piece of fish and some salad. Dinner is normally, maybe a steak and some broccolini. There's no sort of like set formula or pattern that I work around. It's just got to be yummy, I reckon.
Yeah, but like a good veggies, protein, and making sure that it's not processed sounds like what you'd be eating every day.
Yeah. I guess I'm lucky in the sense that I love cooking.
Yeah.
So everything I make is from scratch. Teal, my wife, loves cooking too. So we rarely eat out, and so we're not really contending with the whole is it processed or unprocessed, because we're cooking with natural foods at home.
Yeah.
And it's just more economical like that. We've got 3 kids, so going out is not much fun, I have to tell you.
It's a lot. Okay, for my next question, how can you sort fact from fiction when it comes to nutrition? Who do you follow / podcasts or blogs do you recommend?
I don't know whether this answers your question, but I've got a crush on this guy at the moment, Dr. Andrew Huberman.
Yeah.
Have you come across him?
No, I'll have to look him up.
So he is a professor of ophthalmology and a professor of neuroscience or neuromedicine. Incredibly smart. He's either Yale or Harvard, one of those two. So top of his game, and he's
Yeah.
talking about how the brain works and how real neuroscience, but he delivers it in a very layman way, which is a skill unto itself.
Mhm.
So he's my go-to at the moment. I'm not sure, obviously he's talking about physiology and biochemistry, and so a lot of nutrition comes into that. In terms of nutrition per se, I don't know. I'm not really. I guess Mark Sisson. I might read some of his blogs from time to time.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a authority in the whole. Not just an authority, but he's got a great attitude. It's not, these parameters about what foods are in and what foods are out are fairly lax. He's all about optimizing happiness. And so if you want to lose weight and feel fit and feel energized, which means that you can achieve happiness, that's the way to go. But if you're already happy doing what you're doing, even if those foods are outside of those parameters, he's cool with that too. So I kind of like that
Mm.
attitude that he has. Look, I'm sure I'm not alone. I watch or listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, but he's starting to give me the shits in the last few
Very long.
last. Well, yeah, I think he's just got to a level of attention that it's affecting the style, and it's sort of, there's lots of subjects that they talk about that's on a bit of a loop. So I've kind of tuned out of that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's talk about sugar. What would you say your relationship is with sugar, and like, what are your thoughts in general of it?
Um, I'm lucky, I guess, in the sense I naturally don't have a sweet tooth.
Yeah, me too.
Um, and probably the sweetest thing that I have on a regular basis would be berries.
Yeah.
And that kind of suffices. That's sweet enough for me. Um, but I'm also aware of how the whole machinery works. So if I was to push against my sort of lack of a sweet taste, lack of a sweet um, desire, I guess, go actually put sweet things in my mouth. I know how the machinery works, in a sense that your neurons in your gut detect the sugar, they send a message via the vagus nerve, lights up your dopamine like a Christmas tree. And so you get this oscillation between the desire and the reward versus the pain, and it's the pain that drives you back to having more.
Yeah, the addiction.
The addiction, it's the underpinning of addiction. So I guess, we're all so close to feeding that beast. I'm just lucky that I'm naturally not. I coach people all over the world, and it's a recurring issue or problem or addiction that my clients face, and I often say that it's a lot of it's out of their control. We are pre-programmed to desire and gorge on sugar, and so our chemistry, our sort of our inherited chemistry, leans into that because it's enabled us over thousands of years to survive. It's enabled us over thousands of years to fatten up for winter. It's
Yeah.
a survival mechanism, and it served us well as a species. But fast forward to 2021.
Yeah, continued.
Yeah, there's no winter. Winter never comes. There's always food on the shelves. So we don't need to fatten up, but
Yeah.
because we have this pre-programmed mechanism in our makeup, it becomes very hard for people to down-regulate that, to quieten the internal noise that
Yeah.
leans us in towards those types of foods. We actually
Yeah.
have, this is all kind of fascinating. Maybe I'm going off topic. Maybe I've had too much coffee, but the neurons in our gut that detect sugar, that consequently tell our biochemistry via the vagus nerve to release dopamine. It has a sensory response, which is the release of dopamine. It also has a motor response. So it actually physically leans you in towards having those foods. So if you think about foods that we don't like, so we smell something that we don't like, or we taste something that's disgusting, we repel, right? We go, that's disgusting. We push back, we push away. Sugar, and I'm talking about, carbohydrates here as well, like not just lollies, not just chocolate
Oh,
bars, but all manner of. There's actually a leaning in. There's a motor response. It's all kind of fascinating. Anyway, I digress. Sorry,
you digress.
too much coffee.
That's fine. I have the IQS community to ask you. So someone has written in, I've recently switched to cutting out meat from my diet, but feel like my energy levels have dipped since. What ingredients would you recommend adding to my help?
So sorry, they've cut out meat.
Cut out meat, yep, and their energy levels has dipped.
So I reckon there's some supplementation that might help, but obviously supplementation is the pointy end. If you can get all your nutrients and your minerals from real food, then that's the first point of call. But I would definitely sort of entertain looking at B12 and even a multivitamin as a very base level. I guess when you're talking about veganism, again, back to our point right at the start, it's highly individualized. So if you cut out meat, does that include, mollusks? Does that include eggs? So are eggs inclusive? It depends what your motivation for becoming a vegan is. If it's anything to do with an animal, then okay, eggs are out. But maybe eggs are part of the equation because there's no animal cruelty, there's no death. Are bivalve mollusks in, are oysters in, then they're believed to not be sentient beings. So it's hard to make the distinction, and that distinction is different for everyone. And I think rightly so, like it's highly individualized. It's based on, as we said, like our values and ethics. But back to that lady's point, just crowding out as much processed foods.
Yeah.
I guess the trick is with veganism is back to my point about prioritizing protein. It's okay, where are we getting our protein from? And is it legumes? Is it chickpeas? Is it that family, legume family? In which case, there's a significant carb load too. So we just need to be mindful of that. But I guess my advice today on here would be just to really upregulate the abundance of above ground veggies and salads and color, berries and anything with great color, and
A rainbow plate.
a rainbow plate. It's a bit of a cliche, but it serves as well.
As well, exactly. Okay, so another question that's come through is 3 simple steps to be eating more sustainably.
Well, what was it? 3 steps to eating more sustainably.
Yeah. Simple step.
Simple step.
So is even just going to your butcher and asking them where it's all sourced from. I think even what you were saying earlier about just being more mindful, I think thinking about it beforehand would help, right?
Yeah, I think we're living in an age where it's very easy to fill up a supermarket trolley or basket with food because it's just laying there in supermarket shelves. It's a very luxurious, privileged position to be in. But with that comes a degree of unconscious purchasing. I've been guilty of it in the past, but I think, and it's sort of, I guess it's evolved in me over the last 10 or 15 years, the importance and the significance of understanding where that, whatever it is, where that trout has come from, where that steak has come from. And if it's come from a food system that doesn't align to my values, then, I'll just select another brand or choose another shop to help support the farmers and the growers and the producers that are attempting, at the very least, to prescribe to a methodology of farming that supports human health, environmental health, and animal husbandry.
Yeah. Someone has asked on the live here, I think about the previous question, why would you suggest above ground veggies?
Well, I guess that's all sort of tied back into having a carb appropriate diet.
Yeah.
And that's not a term I've coined. It's a term Dr. Cliff Harvey has coined. And it's about having an appropriate amount of carbs for your energetic output.
Yeah.
So, when you look at your macronutrients, you've got protein, you've got fat, you've got carbs. So protein and fat have a structural, functional role in the body. Go without them for a period of time, we're going to get sick. We're going to, there's going to be cracks in your physiology and your health and your immunity. Carbohydrate doesn't necessarily have a structural, functional role in the body. It's primarily an energy source. So when we frame it like that, do I need carbohydrates for the energy output that I'm exposing myself to? So if I'm having a sedentary lifestyle, do I need plates of mashed potato, bowls of pasta? Probably not, because of the downstream effect that that's going to have. Yeah. But if I'm a CrossFitter or I'm a soccer player, then you could probably argue that that's beneficial for my energetic needs. So I guess the above ground veggies point was me, I guess maybe it was irrelevant in the whole context of things, but the below ground veggies are typically higher in carbohydrates. So if you're looking for a lower carbohydrate intake, then, as a sweeping statement, look for your above ground veggies.
Yeah, that makes sense. So someone else has written, I'm concerned about animal rights, brutal farming practices, environmental issues. There are no regenerative farmers locally, but also my family's long-term health.
Well, I guess this echoes back to those documentaries, which are very alarming, and I'm the first to acknowledge that those animal practices are disgusting. It's a grotesque version of farming. We've highly commoditized chickens and cows, and to the point that there's such lack of respect or regard for the animal. So it's a disgusting version. But there is a version that includes welfare, factors in ecological health, factors in environmental health. In fact, there's a methodology, and I'm talking about regen, that can actually significantly help the climate crisis. Who would have thought, we've been searching high and wide for this solution to the climate crisis, whether it's wind turbines or tidal power or solar. And of course, that's all going to contribute, but it's actually underneath our feet and has been the whole time. Yeah. The ability for soil to sequester carbon on a level that's going to make a significant difference. But the way that intensive farming manages its land and manages its soil, it's not going to happen. But if we can manage livestock in a way that mimics nature and allow nature to do what it does best, then we're in a fighting chance to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And coupled with that, if there's carbon in the soil, there's biodiversity, the ability to retain and hold water is increased, which is super important in a country like this. The lady or the gentleman's point about the proximity to regen farms is the missing piece of the puzzle, right? So in Australia, regen farms are on the increase. They're dwarfed by intensive farming, but the conversations are starting. You know, there's initiatives to help farms that are currently intensively farmed to transition to regen. Like, I don't believe it's an echo chamber anymore. I believe that not the masses, but there's a growing contingent of people that are flying the flag for regen for a number of reasons: human health, environmental health, and animal welfare. But I guess there's not enough people demanding it, that the infrastructure is there that this lady or this gentleman can see it on their supermarket shelves.
Yeah.
But it's happening. So there is a just like there's Organics Australia or whatever the governing body is. There's what is it? Land to Market, which is a governing organisation that it'll be instantly recognisable when it's on your supermarket shelf that it's come from a regen producer. So there's starting to be infrastructure around it. It's a slow-moving beast. It's not going to happen by tomorrow. It's not going to happen by next week. But at some point...
Yeah, it's progress.
It's progress, yeah. I mean, Harris Farm have been the very early adopter. They have a dedicated regen section on their website. They have on their supermarket shelves, there's a dedicated regen. So whether that's a bottle of wine, some lamb mince, a chuck steak or whatever it is, like they have a dedicated, so good on them. And I think,
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. But it is the chink in the chain at the moment. If somebody in a more, I don't know where this lady is or this gentleman is, but there are, and I'm getting involved in one myself, there are a growing number of businesses that deliver regen meat boxes to your door. So I would suggest just Googling regen meat boxes. It's something that I'm going to develop over the next few months. So if she wants to wait till then, I'm happy to share my details, because we have a regen farm. Yeah. So my in-laws have had a farm for 40 years. Hasn't always been regen, but for the last 5 or 6, there's been a massive shift in attitude and methodology, going from, traditional intensive farm practices using chemical intervention, pesticides, fertilizer, to now a more holistic approach. And so we will be taking that meat and distributing, certainly Sydney based anyway. We don't know the logistics of how you get it to all postcodes in Australia, but I think, fast forward 5 years, 2 years, it'll happen.
I hope so too. So someone has actually just asked, what can we do to help regenerative farming? Are there any petitions, etc.?
There are a number of initiatives that we can donate to, one being Carbon 8. So carbon, CARBON, and 8, the number 8. So we can pledge and make donations to them. Now, they help educate and facilitate the transition from traditional farming to regen for farmers.
Awesome.
I'm sure there's a number of others, but that would probably be my first port of call. I think sorry, Ash, I was just going to add that's one way. The other way is have conversations about it.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Yeah, I think
Sorry.
Even this is perfect, because I think people watching will now Google it and think about it more. And I think getting the conversation started gets more people talking about it.
Totally. It becomes it's not farmers and producers and a few sort of bods outside of that industry being in an echo chamber. It becomes, we're not at the point where the masses are talking about it, but it is popping up on, magazines and newspapers more prevalently than it was sort of 12 months ago.
Yeah,
but for that lady, maybe a really good reference is, it's really inspiring. He encapsulates it amazingly because he has to, because he's only got a limited time. But Alan Savory does a TED talk. So if the lady or gentleman goes to TED Talks and just punches in Alan Savory, he's a African ecologist, environmentalist. There's probably something else. He's a farmer as well, but
somebody does everything.
So he through 30 years of land management is able to identify that if you allow livestock, so whether that's goats, sheeps, cattle, to move in a way that mimics nature, in the sense that they mob together. So any animal of that description in nature will naturally walk shoulder to shoulder, because there's safety in numbers.
Yeah.
And what that does, they don't have the luxury of chewing only the sweet grasses. They're chewing all the vegetation, and they're keeping the vegetation in a vegetative state, which is, perfect, ideal, optimal for photosynthesis. So then immediately you're drawing down carbon and locking it in the soil. Couple that with the turnover of topsoil, the pooing and the weeing before they move on, because they don't want to stand in their own feces. They don't want to stand in their own urine. Yeah. They're constantly on this almost incessant drive to find new vegetation. So they move on. When we allow cows and livestock to just roam indiscriminately, we reduce the benefits of that. So anyway, this Alan Savory, amazing guy, but through his research, through his experience with land management, he thinks that there's an opportunity to change the huge swathes of land through the equatorial belt, so through Asia, through Africa, to turn them, so regenerate them from desertified land. So this is untenable land. You can't grow crops, you can't have cattle on them, there's nothing for them to eat. But over time you can transition that and turn that untenable land into tenable land and benefit the climate. Now his suggestion is that because these swathes of land are so significant, if you were able to regenerate them, the amount of carbon that you could pull out of the atmosphere will enable us to go to pre-industrialized times.
Yeah, amazing.
Amazing. So anyway, if you've got, I don't know how long what's TED talk, like 12 minutes, 14 minutes, 17 minutes maybe. Yeah. It's a great use of time. Alan Savory.
Sure. So someone has actually just written in and said, I just hopped on, but I have to leave, but this has been one of the most compelling conversations I have listened to. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's very sweet. Thanks, Mum.
Very sweet. Well, I think that's all we have time for. I have a few other questions, but I'm thinking we could even just send them to you and we could feature them across the IQS socials to let the community know a little bit more.
Sure.
But would you like to tell everybody where they can find you or even chat to you more about all of these topics?
Sure. So I guess on the subject of regen and food systems, I wrote a book year before last called The Sustainable Diet. So unpacking the food systems, where to put our money when we're shopping, the health benefits of it all. Like, it took me a year to research it. And I legitimately wanted to know whether going vegan was the solution to human health, environmental health, and animal welfare. And, I found some pretty interesting research just on that. It's worth, if somebody wants to delve a little bit deeper, or someone sitting on the fence or dabbling with veganism or unsure which way to go for those reasons I described, then I'm going to forget his name now. There's a great, well, I have forgotten his name. Anyway, I don't know how to get it to you later, Ash, but I will send you this guy's research.
Yeah, we can definitely later. Sure.
Anyway, aside from that, you can find me at scottgoodingproject.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me all about this. And I will share this video that, across the IQS channel so everyone can watch it later too.
Ah, you're a star. Thanks, Ash.
Perfect. Thank you. Enjoy your day.
All right. All the best. Take care.
Bye.